evening, everyone. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Just like to remind you of social distancing. When you leave your desks to go anywhere, please wear your masks. And I'm sure you're all fully aware now of the evacuation procedures. Move straight onto the agenda. Sorry, I've already done some of the agenda. Apologies for absence received from Councillor Jim Bailey. Is there any other apologies? No. Moving on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of April 2021. You should have all received a copy. Move to have them minutes noted. Thank you. Councillor Oxley. All right, okay. Is everybody happy for me to take that by general affirmation? Yeah, okay.
Speak just a bit more into the microphone. I understand the sound on live streams a bit quiet.
All right, okay. Moving on to any urgent business. Nothing's been brought to my attention. No. Moving on to declarations of interest. Is there any members that will be declaring any interests under the Code of Conduct? No, no declarations of interest. Moving on to item number 6, the customer complaints and compliments. And I think we're moving to Margaret Wallace for this. Margaret, good evening.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, thank you. So this is the Corporate Complaints and Compliments report for the year 2020 to 21. The report just outlines to note the number of complaints received in 2021 and to show that there's a decrease in less of stage 2 complaints, and note the number of customer compliments received in 2021 has increased significantly over the last year. Also to note the improvement made across the organisation to improve the complaints handling to ensure the council puts the customers right first, and this is in line with the council plan. Just highlighting some of the stuff that are in the report. For 2021 year-end performance, we received 37 complaints compared to 60 complaints in 1920 of the previous year. So a definite better outcome from complaints that we received. Also, most of the complaints received were at first operational stage, and they were dealt, 91.8% were dealt at stage 1, compared to 1920, which was 73.3%. So a definite improvement in us responding to our stage 1 complaints. You'll also see there was a reduction of 16 stage 2 compared to us only receiving 3 for this year of the last year. The average response time again was 7.78 days compared to 1920, which was 8.70 days. So again, an improvement in that. There's been a lot of work done in complaints handling over the last year, even during COVID, and we did have extensive training through the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman on effective complaints handling, which involved heads of services and managers and any team leaders that dealt with customer complaints. The feedback from the sessions were very positive for staff, and it allowed them to think about how they dealt with customer complaints slightly differently. We've also got 2 new staff that are customer insight and complaints officers that have been put in place in the customer service team. And again, that is to just make sure that we have really good corporate complaints handling. The quality is of a high standard. We've also reviewed the corporate complaints procedure, which you will see in Appendix 3, and it's also on our website. So it's a more kind of customer focused and friendly kind of way of kind of looking at the corporate complaints. The compliments that we received in 2021 were 104, and this was a great improvement to the compliments that we received, of 46 that we received in 1920. And that's really the update of the complaints. You'll also see an appendix to that we've given you a kind of overview of the complaints and kind of put it into charts for you, so you can see the kind of different complaints that we've got throughout the year and the different departments throughout the year as well, and the different stages of the complaints. We've also put a reporting of just what the complaints and lessons learned, and we're looking to review this and take forward to make sure that any service improvements that we've highlighted in this in the future will be followed up to make sure that they're being compliant. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Margaret. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Ross.
Cheers, thanks, Margaret. I understand from reading the report there are a lot of positives in this, and one thing I did read and myself sort of made a note of, that complaints can very often be a learning that makes us stronger and better at what we do. But I'm just wondering about the Ombudsman process, because in 5.1 and in 6.9 it mentions the training that's going on with effective complaint handling and social care of the Ombudsman that's involved. Who triggered this? Was that somebody saying that we needed to do this, or was that us asking for better training?
It was part of our council plan. So we had kind of said that we wanted better customer complaint handling and better customer excellence. There was also feedback from managers when we were reviewing some of them. We just felt the quality of some of the responses that we were doing and that there was maybe room for improvement. So as you say, rather than services taking it as a slight to their service, actually it was a learning that we wanted to get them to kind of learn that actually if there was recurrent complaints coming in, that actually a service improvement was maybe required. So that's the reason why we brought it in, and we just felt that because they've got their good practice, and for basically for staff to understand exactly what the Ombudsman's process of actually how they review complaints and what they would kind of expect from us as a local authority. So it was just to do that and make sure. Reason why we wanted to kind of bring it in.
Sorry, my mic's gone off. Could you just explain the process then, in terms of how we inform from the complaint the officers, how we disseminate that down into the various teams? Because I couldn't quite get to the bottom of that in this report. It was sort of mentioned, but I'm not fully sure of how we kind of let people know where the faults are.
Yeah, so a report gets pulled off. So we've got a couple of things going just now. So what we're doing is we're reviewing our call centre information that comes down, and we're also looking at our customer complaints. So what happens is we ask for a response from the service. If there's been a fault in the service, what we do is we ask them what service improvements are they going to make. So just now we've not really been following that up. So the next process is really, how do we follow that up to make sure the service improvements have been made, and also to monitor the kinds of complaints. So just now you'll see in the report what we've kind of tended to do is look at it just by department, but what we really want to look at is more by subject. So I think that's what you're meaning. So, you know, if it's like we're getting a lot of complaints about missed bin collections and there's complaints about that coming in regular, we want to understand what can waste services do to rectify that, so to reduce the amount of complaints coming in about that, you know, or is there a specific area that it happens to, or whatever, is it to do with pull-out bins or whatever? So it's just so we can delve a wee bit deeper into some of the complaints that are coming in, Councillor Ross, kind of going forward. So that's where we're kind of looking for the next improvements to be.
Yeah, that was one of my my sort of aims of the question, really, was because I haven't compared it across quartiles, because obviously you've given it the evidence here from a certain quartile, but if we looked across the board, you know, I know there's been a problem with street scene and repeated problems, but if we're just repeating the same problem and not addressing it, that's going to appear in every quartile, and that's where the issues could be. Whereas if we just eradicated it, then we haven't got a problem.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what we want to really learn from that. And that's what, when we were reviewing the process, that's what we kind of came back with, that we were getting services saying they were making improvement, but there was still some stuff we were getting kind of repeat complaints about. And street scene is one of the ones that we do. But again, just getting street scene to actually go out and speak to the customer as well. So again, having that better customer excellence rather than just sending a letter saying, sorry, we missed your bin. Do you know what I mean? Like actually doing something about it and being more proactive about it. So it's a service improvement.
Could I just ask about the Ombudsman as well? Because it said there was no triggering of the legal process. Is the Ombudsman not deemed a legal body in itself then, or is that a separate level?
So yeah, I mean, essentially what the Ombudsman, when they came to train us, they said that they had no concerns for us as a council, and they do that whole kind of legal process. I think what we were saying is, from a legal process, that our legal team weren't involved in anything to do with any of the complaints that came in. That was from more that point of view. But yeah, I mean, they will give us recommendations and then they'll come back to make sure that we've made the service improvements. But I must admit, when we did the training, they did say that they didn't have any concerns and they thought it was very proactive of us actually making sure that we were doing the training kind of going forward to ensure that we've kept the good quality that we essentially had within the council.
Thank you. Just one final one while I'm on. You mentioned there's new staff, and obviously there'll be existing staff that are involved in dealing with the complaints. How are they trained in terms of protection from them against, not abuse, but in terms of dealing with things that maybe are upsetting, or is there enough protection for our staff in that?
Yeah, so they have regular one-to-ones. So obviously them coming in, again, they're working with services and they're trying to check over the letters for quality. So again, we've done a lot of work and Steph Metcalf has been in trying to oversee this to make sure that she's working with the teams. So when they're giving feedback, that they're not taking it offensively, but at the same time, making sure that they have the right skills. So again, that's the feedback that we're trying to get back from services. How do they find kind of like handling it? Do they need more help and assistance? Actually, how to kind of phone up a customer, how to handle a customer. So the next thing we're hoping to try and do with some of the insight officers is actually how to deal with difficult customers or difficult conversations, that kind of conflict resolution, because the whole aspect of it is that we try to resolve it at the first point of contact. So again, at the customer contacts team, we're trying to make sure that we're dealing with things at the first point of contact before they actually get to a complaint, and we're using that as well. So that's why we're looking at both elements of that data, and yeah, definitely to support the staff. So just now they get regular meetings with Steph Metcalf once a week just to talk about the complaints and anything that is kind of coming up that's concerning them.
Thank you very much.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Oxley.
Yeah. Thanks, Margaret. It's just really, I guess it's a question. I'm not sure if it's a question of. It just fits in with something I've raised at the last couple of meetings. You have made reference to the corporate plan, this being part of it. I have at the last two occasions when we've had different things being reported, said I think in my opinion it would be very helpful if when these reports were done they actually referenced where in the corporate plan they tie in very specifically, simply so that we're all aware that that is that is the document that is driving us rather than just whim or fancy. So my question is, would it be possible for next time just to try and make that very specific into which part of the corporate plan we're actually touching into?
Yeah, I've highlighted it in 5.1 under the council plan, and the objective just access to all a innovative and enterprise council, and includes the commitment to transform our customer service using our new ways of working. But happy to kind of like break that down if you want more kind of further information on it, Councillor Oxley, kind of going forward.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? No. Thank you, Margaret. I'd just like to say thanks for all your hard work, and it's good to see that the complaints have reduced a little bit and the compliments have gone up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recommendations to note.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to recommend that the committee note the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Raper seconded that. Is everybody happy to do a general affirmation? Yeah. Can that be noted? Thanks. Moving on to agenda item number 7 is the appointment of the Corporate Governance Standards Subcommittee, and I'll hand over to Simon, Councillor Simon Copley.
Thank you, Chair. Every year at the first meeting after the annual council meeting, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, sitting with its standards hat on, has to appoint a subcommittee on corporate governance standards. This subcommittee only needs to meet if there is a formal complaint against a councillor, which gets as far as a formal hearing. But we appoint so that that body's there so it can meet should it be necessary during the course of the year. The subcommittee comprises 3 members from this committee with up to 3 named substitutes. Political proportionality doesn't apply in the case of the subcommittee, so we need to ask you for 3 named members for the substitute for the committee and then 3 further names for the substitutes. So if the chair wants to take names when we've gathered those, we can then vote to approve them. Thank you.
Hi, I think from information from Simon, I would usually be one of the names for the committee. Councillor Wass has also expressed an interest. Is there any other councillors that would be interested, either as a substitute or on the standards committee? Councillor King or Councillor Oxley? Okay, so we'll have Councillor King on the committee. Are you happy to be a substitute, Councillor Oxley? Anybody else to be a substitute? We need 2 more. Councillor Garbutt-Moore? Councillor Rain? Okay, so Councillor Garbutt-Moore and Councillor Rain. Okay, thank you. Yeah, if there's no objections, we can take them nominations as such by general affirmation. Yeah, thanks. Moving on to the decisions from the other committees, and this is the Policy and Resources Committee held on the 27th of May. I believe everybody's received the minutes. Have all the councillors seen the minutes? Yeah. Are there any questions on the report? Move to have the report noted. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Garbutt-Moore seconds that. If there's nobody against it, if we go to a general affirmation. Yeah, could we have that noted? Thanks. We now move to item number 9, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Forward Plan on pages 27 to 32.
The forward plan appended to the agenda sets out the business that is currently pending for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Members will be aware that the committee has effectively 3 remits in our constitution. There's the scrutiny remit, the audit remit and the standards remit, so business will cover a mixture of those 3 areas. With regards to the committee standards remit, I wanted to mention under this item that we're proposing to hold 2 further sessions of standards training or workshops, and I wanted to run those proposals past members to see if you were supportive of what was planned. 2 dates have been identified. The training would be in the evening, and we'd be able to record that for any members who couldn't attend the session in real time. So the dates would be the 28th of June and the 14th of July. For one session, we were proposing a workshop on the protocol on member and officer relations, which is in the council's constitution. That's not been reviewed and revisited for some while, and a workshop to gather views from elected members about how that could be revised and improved would seem to be a good use of one session. For the second session in July, we're hoping by then that the new code of conduct, which you've already received some training on, will have been finalised by the government, and the guidance on it will have been released, and we were proposing to do another session tying into that, specifically focusing on behaviours and in particular the issue of respect and civility, which has been one that's been sort of drawn to our attention through previous workshops and discussions, and also some of the complaints that have been dealt with. So those were the 2 proposals that I was putting forward. As the Standards Committee for the Council, I like to run ideas on standards training past this committee to get member support or comments. Is there something different or additional we should be doing with those sessions as part of our responsibility to promote and maintain high standards of conduct? And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. I don't think anybody on the committee would disagree that we need help with the standards and they do need to improve. Does anybody else have any comment? Councillor Wass.
You mentioned earlier, Sam, when we were discussing this before the meeting, virtual sessions. Would the workshop one on the 28th, would that be an actual session here, or would that still be virtual?
That would be a virtual session as well, but run in more of a workshop style.
Thank you. If all members support that, we can have that noted in the minutes. Thank you. On the forward plan, I would also like to, I've already spoken to some councillors and I'd like some ideas of moving forward for the next year. I personally feel, after being 2 years on the committee, that the actual scrutinising of decisions has sort of fallen by the wayside. The audit seems to have taken over, but I think that's external and internal auditors are in charge and doing a good job on that now, and I think we need to start scrutinising again. Personally, I'd like the climate action plan to be looked at. It's nearly 2 years since we put the emergency plan in operation, and I think that's one of the items that we need to be looking at. Is there anybody else that has any suggestions? Ideally, there'd be about 3 to 4 issues. Councillor Oxley.
Yeah, I agree completely. The last 2 years have been very difficult to do beyond, if you like, the statutory stuff, and it is time to get back to something else. Going back to last time we discussed this, I did raise the fact that I felt, given all that has been going on, it would be a good thing for this committee to review the way the performance appraisal system is being used. We've heard reference from Margaret in her report today about the extra training for people, the way that people are having to deal with complaints. And I really think we ought to establish that the performance management, the appraisal system, is actually serving the purpose it's there for and is being used as part of the whole thing about staff well-being and making sure that staff are safe. I know it's been a difficult 2 years for appraisal because most people have not been here. I don't even know whether there's any being done. I think that's something we really just ought to get on the front burner and just have a look at, because all the concerns, particularly through this pandemic, we've expressed about looking after our staff. Are our staff being well supported? Are they being looked after? The key mechanism for that is the performance appraisal and the way that is used. So I think that is a very important issue for us to have a look at.
Thank you, Councillor Oxley. Is there anybody else? Councillor Wass.
Yeah, I would just like to bring up to scrutinise the affordable housing in Ryedale, just with everything else that's going on. Simple as that. Thank you.
Councillor Garbett-Moore.
Thank you. I believe we started looking at the equality and diversity policies within the council pre-coronavirus. I'm not sure how far we got with that, but I would like an update at very least, if we could have that on the agenda at some point. Yeah. I'd also like to possibly review the two enforcement officers we've got in place, just to see how things are going. I've had some really good reports about those two positions, but I would like to see what sort of issues they're dealing with. Yeah, I think that it's nearly a year since they've been in post, so it'd be good to review those two positions and look at what's worked well and what hasn't.
Thank you, Councillor Garbett-Moore. It's been suggested that ideally there'd be 2 or 3 of these just because of officer capacity. So if we can, between us, discuss which we think are most important. Obviously, I think the climate change one is important because it's the forefront of everything at the moment. But if you can put anything forward now on which ones we think we should be looking at. Councillor Oxley.
Guess what's coming now? I think there's a difference. There's 4 or 5 suggestions there. I think they are different suggestions that be worth taking advice on. I think some of them are simply reviewing what has happened, i.e. where are we with the climate change plan, where are we with the enforcement officers, where are we with the affordable housing. They're all good things to look at, but there's some very simple, I think there's some very simple stuff there that could inform this committee of what's happening. I personally think that, and of course I would, having a look at the appraisal system performance management is a different type of, investigation, and much more of an investigation than a review.
Yes, I can take your point there, Councillor Oxley. I agree. I think that one should be the highest one on the list. As we are all aware, that it needs looking at, and we need to know that everybody's being looked after properly. Councillor Wass.
If I could just ask Councillor Oxley, actually, if you think because of that weighting of what we're looking at, do you think they are actually all doable, really?
Thank you, Councillor Wass. I'll just find a spot to stand on. And then, no, Clive, I'm sorry, I'm pulling your leg. I think to take on 5 chunks of work like this, that are all big chunks of work, would be impossible. I actually think that some, for want of a better term, some desktop work on 2 or 3 of them might actually enable short reports to come to this committee that said, for example, on the enforcement officers, this is the number of times they've been called out, this is the sort of reaction we're getting to them, it's all fine. Or I think there are some of those. I think on affordable housing, and please, I am a huge fan of affordable housing, and we haven't got enough, but just some simple numbers would help. And I think that's not a huge piece of work. We could then decide whether or not it's something we want to do something more about when we've got those basic information together.
I'm just wondering if we could actually outline specifically what we want then in terms of each of these, and maybe they are doable as a whole set, rather than having, you know, massive weighty research into everything. And as you say, just to keep abreast of where we are with everything, that might be a good solution.
I'm sorry if I may, Chair. I mean, maybe we can do it with all of them. You know, for example, on the performance management, you know, just how much of it is taken, what percentage has been done, what sort of feedback are we getting, just so we get some basic information, and then maybe we can make a decision about, well, let's pursue this one and let's pursue this one and let's put those on the, we've had a quick look and all seems fine or whatever basis.
Thank you, Councillor Oxley. I think my idea with the climate action plan is to look at it and then maybe have a climate committee through planning to look at it, so we can briefly look at it, see what needs doing, and then maybe move it on, so that more work can be done by planning. Councillor Garbett-Moore. Oh, sorry, I thought you raised your hand. I think that I agree with Councillor Oxley that I think some of these aren't that big, and we could perhaps look at them all, but perhaps take advice on that and move forward at a later date.
Thank you, Chair. Normally, when we've taken ideas for scrutiny topics from members, we've gone away and scoped 2 or 3 of them and then brought the potential scopes back for discussion. They've been refined and developed with input from this committee, and then a decision's been taken as to which one is prioritised and taken forward at that time, and sometimes the sort of second choice is then done after that, just in terms of keeping the workload manageable, both in terms of officers and for this committee and the time that's put in. So we could, there's 2 issues there that this committee has looked at before. I think, as I recall from Policy and Resources Committee a couple of weeks ago, they'd asked for an update on the Climate Change Action Plan as well. So it may be that that piece of work is of interest for both committees, or that you see what Policy and Resources does on it first before deciding what you wish to do. Equality and diversity, as was mentioned, that has been looked at in the past, and I think got as far as some sort of interim report. So it may be of interest if we recirculate that for members to, I don't know how many of the current members are involved in that, but as an update on the work that was previously done, and we could look at potentially scoping the other 3 topics if that's a helpful way of going forward. We'd also talk to the service areas concerned, because obviously we need input from them, and if that impacts on delivering key priorities, there's a balance that has to be taken as to how we use our staffing resource. So we'd be able to talk to the heads of service and find out what those issues were as well. It may also be of interest, just in terms of tying in with the committee's audit work, that the internal audit in conversations with different heads of service about putting together the new internal audit plan, but we're also linking into that to look at making sure scrutiny and audit complement and don't duplicate what each other is doing. So from that piece of work, there may also be other ideas for topics that come out of those discussions, obviously taking account of potential reorganisation in 2 years' time and the impact of COVID as we're, you know, slowly coming out of lockdown and restrictions. So hopefully that helps as a proposal for taking things forward, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Raper.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate what Mr. Copley, I'm going to say Oxley, it's Mr. Copley, has given us that information. We have been here before, in a sense, and we've looked at things before, and we've done a look-see to see where we need to look more deeply. And I can't see that anything that Simon just told us now is anything different from that at the present time. Then we can go for favourites and the ones that are concerning. And it's at that point that you can actually then delve and dive down. We can do light touch look-sees everywhere all the time. That's not a problem, I wouldn't have thought. And asking heads of service for a feedback on what their opinion is of their baby or their responsibility is never a bad thing, and we can get a lot of good feedback from them about what they think is the potential improvement areas in their own departments. It's always worth doing that. It makes them feel a little bit more appreciated, I would have thought as well, if that doesn't sound a little bit conceited. But we have some very good staff. Let's utilise them, but let's not overburden them with questions after question after question, and then not doing a great deal with the answers. That's the potential fall down area, and has been for quite some time, is what do you do when you've got that information? It needs to be something that that's utilised and useful. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Raper. Councillor Wass.
I appreciate what Councillor Raper is saying there, and obviously fully support the officers in what they're doing. But, you know, things such as quality and diversity that Councillor Garbutt-Moore's brought up, it's all well and good saying, you know, we've touched these in the past, but we have to scrutinise and we have to make sure things are abreast, and we are fully supporting our staff in this. Otherwise, we just take it on face value, and I think we need to ask integral questions which are going to support ultimately everybody within this building and in the wider community. And if we get it right, it's going to be right elsewhere. And it is difficult, and I appreciate the workload, you know, but we could all argue and say we're all overworked, but we have to scrutinise.
Thank you, Councillor Wass. I think I'm of the same mind, really. I do think these are important. Equality and diversity was touched on before, but I don't think any great work was done on it. The same with universal credit. It started, but then we never actually finished anything. So I think I personally, in the next year, would actually like to scrutinise something and get some results from it. And I understand that that might be difficult for the workload for the officers, but I do think it's something we need to all stick together with and be strong about. Councillor Oxley.
Sorry, I was just thinking, I can't be thinking aloud, thinking quietly. I wonder if in looking at the way the appraisal system, performance management's been used, we might uncover some stuff about equality and diversity at the same time, and that they might actually be something that can be, in those initial phases, you know, looked at together in terms of if there are issues about equality and diversity, they should have come out through that performance management system, or should come out through it. Just trying to pull things together and see if we can get some fairly light touches started to inform a decision at the next meeting about what are the one or two we want to really hone down onto.
Thank you, Councillor Oxley. Anybody else got anything to say? No. So I suggest then we put forward at the moment the performance appraisal system, the affordable housing and the enforcement officers review. Is everybody happy with that? Climate change is being looked at by P&R, and we'll see what happens then, and then we can revisit that if we need to then. Is everybody okay? Councillor Oxley.
The other thing that's just crossed my mind, within the internal audit, do we not get as part of what's already in the plan going forward, is there not an update on equality and diversity as part of that audit? I seem to remember having a fairly lengthy discussion about it at an internal audit feedback session a few years ago. I might be mistaken, Simon. I guess it's all embraced and it pops up in everything, doesn't it?
I couldn't give you a definitive answer off the top of my head, but it does ring a bell with me as well. So that might be correct. We can certainly check that with internal audit and confirm.
Okay, well, we can always revisit at a later date, but if we put them 3 forward for now, can that go to, is that general affirmation? Is that okay with everyone? Yeah, yeah. I've no other business. Has anybody else got anything they wish to discuss tonight? No? Councillor Wass? No. Okay, thank you, everybody.